Bonsoir à tous, bonjour à tous, applaudissements. C'est bon. Ça faisait pas très spontané, hein. Je suis en train de regarder parce qu'il y a encore des gens dehors qui aimeraient assister à cette leçon de cinéma qui est d'abord très exceptionnelle ici à Cannes. C'est la première fois que Alfonso Cuarón va faire cette leçon de cinéma. Toutes ces leçons de cinéma, d'ailleurs, pour la plupart, ont été faites par le critique français Michel Simon. Et quand on regarde la liste, il y a quand même eu quelque chose d'assez impressionnant, du saisissement d'une époque au fur et à mesure du passage des décennies, puisque on en franchit une autre cette année. Et tous les grands metteurs en scène, Milos Forman, à qui on pense, par exemple, était l'un des premiers à les inaugurer, ces leçons. Et tous les grands metteurs en scène sont venus, souvent, ça alternait entre les Américains, les Français. Clint Eastwood était là dimanche dernier pour répondre aux questions de Kenneth Turam. Mais on est très content d'avoir un Mexicain qui fait partie de cette extraordinaire génération de talents de cinéastes. Et vous savez qu'on a dans ce festival Guillermo del Toro, qui hier a fait une magnifique intervention lors de la soirée anniversaire. Alejandro González Iñárritu, qui fait une installation de réalité virtuelle, qui est sans doute la première installation de réalité virtuelle d'auteur, c'est-à-dire de poésie, de transgression, d'une narration très particulière. Tout le monde ne peut pas l'avoir puisque c'est individuel, c'est un spectateur par spectateur. Après Cannes, elle ira à Milan, à Los Angeles et à Mexico, peut-être en France. C'est, je pense, quelque chose qui est de l'ordre de ce que les premiers spectateurs ont ressenti lorsqu'ils ont vu le cinématographe en 1895. Là, on rentre dans un monde et dans la nuit mexicaine de façon très, 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 très extraordinaire. Donc, ces Mexicains sont là. Gaël Garcia Bernal était là aussi. Diego Luna, Michel Franco qui a son film au Certain Regard. Bref, il y a un cinéma mexicain qui est l'un des cinémas les plus forts, les plus émergents depuis maintenant une quinzaine d'années. Parmi ces nobles représentants, il y a Alfonso Cuarón, et qui était membre du jury il y a quelques années, qui, comme vous le savez, a gagné des Oscars pour Gravity. Mais vous allez voir, pour ceux qui l'ont découvert avec Gravity, qui est son film complètement américain, qui a une longue carrière. Et quand j'évoquais Diego Luna et Gaël Garcia Bernal, vous vous souvenez tous de Y Tu Mama Tambien, qui a été déjà un premier choc dans le ciel mexicain et mondial. Pour lui donner la réplique, le critique français, critique de positif, critique à la radio, pas seulement critique, mais aussi écrivain, historien, grand érudit et grand fidèle du Festival de Cannes, que je suis heureux avec vous et chaleureusement, et là, spontanément, d'accueillir Michel Simon. Et il va venir ici en gravitation, en lévitation, sous vos applaudissements, sans doute aussi spontanés. Non, la demoiselle qui est devant, c'est... Voilà. Je suis très, très, très heureux de l'accueillir en général au festival et de le savoir ici pour donner la réplique à Michel. Merci d'accueillir Alfonso Cuarón. Messieurs, soyez bons.
Thank you, Thierry. So the conversation will be in English. I think it's...
Désolé.
Could be in Spanish, but I don't speak Spanish.
Désolé.
But anyway, you are, in a way, an international director because it's very interesting, your career, because you have the point of view of the developed country, the United States, and a country in this phase of development, which is Mexico. So it gives you two sides to the thing. So we are going to speak about it. But first of all, I would like to speak about your beginnings. I heard you had a camera at the age of 12, and you were born near the Churubusco studio, which is the famous studio where Buñuel and other people were shooting.
Well, if I just preamble with something.
That what you want.
Yeah, I just say I'm so thrilled to be here. So happy to be here in an event like this. And I'm so honored and touched to have been part of the 70-year festivities last night of the Cannes Film Festival in the presence of real, true masters. It was something really extraordinary. It was so beautiful. I was so touched and grateful to be part and have been involved in this celebration. And we finished the celebration at the end of the dinner, the Mexican way, with mariachis and mezcal and tequila. So yeah, I think that we took over a little bit during the last night. And I realized something. I came to a realization. I'm not sure if Cannes really likes Mexican films. But they love how we party. That's for sure. But anyway, I'm so happy, so proud. And yes, it was not Churubusco Studios, but there was other studios close to my house, very close to my house. And that they shot mostly commercials. And I would sneak into there, but but when I sneak into them, the only thing that I learned is that I was not interested in those studios, but I learned that you could sneak into studios. And so I started sneaking into the Churubusco studios. Yeah, that's...
But it's interesting to see the life of a director, how you did so many different things before making a first film. You photographed some films, some short films. You were an editor, even on the 2 Mexican films that we are going to talk about. Yeah. You were a screenwriter, so you developed a number of... and how did it gel together to become a director?
Look, I think that my journey is a journey that I would never recommend anybody as a pattern. No, because it's a journey, frankly, filled with insecurities. And that I admire so many of my peers and so many young filmmakers that they can start that career with such a confidence. Part of my insecurity, to be frank, were economic. Since I had a kid when I was 20, and so since probably I was 2019, cinema became my means for support. So I was living in a time in which the industry in Mexico was absolutely difficult. You know, it was very difficult for young generations to do anything. There's a lost generation before mine that they didn't do anything, except those 2 movies maybe. So the prospects were really were not good. And on top of that, cinema became the way of maintaining myself. So I consider myself a blue collar of cinema, in the sense that I started with the workers, you know, and always with my goal to become a director. I had a long career as a first assistant director, for instance.
I think you even worked with Ariel Dombal.
I worked with Ariel Dombal. I worked
as an assistant.
As an assistant, yes. I was Ariel Dombal assistant in a film he shot in Mexico. I was so happy to be here, assistant. And
now she could learn from you.
Well, I don't know. I was just staring. So yes, it was, and my life, unfortunately, my career, for a big part that I'm now exercising that, is being connected with that. Not only cinema as the thing I love in life and my vocation, but also as the only way that I learned early on of how to survive. So that's something that was a big chain and ball that I carry through most of my career.
But before you studied cinema at the film school, you studied philosophy, and
parallel.
At the same time.
I didn't finish either. But yeah, it was a parallel situation.
But it's interesting because in this film school you meet Emmanuel Lubezki, the great cameraman, DP, that has followed you, except Harry Potter. I think he photographed all your films.
Exactly.
And he's an extraordinary cameraman.
I think in his own right, one of the most important filmmakers.
And after that, he worked with Tim Burton, with Terrence Malick, with Michael Mann.
With the Coen Brothers.
And we could talk about his work because we will see some excerpts where he really shot quite extraordinary camera movements and so on. And you were also in school with Guillermo del Toro.
No, not in school.
Where did you meet
because
him?
Guillermo is from Guadalajara. And how I meet, because Guillermo is another blue collar of cinema. And we share a lot of insecurities and ball and chains, and I think it's something that has bonded us from early in our lives. Early on, I was from a boom. I did 12 films as a boom operator, for instance, a microphone holder, and Guillermo was an assistant makeup artist, and I heard everybody talk about this genius of Guadalajara, and because even if I was just a blue collar among the young generation of filmmakers, I was known as someone with possibility, So when I started hearing about this weird guy from Guadalajara that was full of possibility, I got a little jealous, And I didn't meet him for a long time until, all my friends worked with him, and they all just talked wonders and how weird he was. And it was not until I was doing a TV show in Mexico before I did my first film that it was some sort of twilight zone that Guillermo and I, we call it the toilet zone, because budgets and so on. And I did my first one, and you got to write and direct and do everything. It was, you have all the freedom to do little thing, And I did it. You shot for 3 days, and I was so proud of the result. And it was loosely based on a Stephen King book, novel, a short story. And then one day I'm in the production office waiting for the producer in the waiting room, and there's this guy, this weird guy, just looking at me. And he had done one. I heard that Guillermo del Toro had done one of those. And it was this one awkward thing of two guys, like knowing who is the other guy, but like cautious. And he said, literally says, "You're Cuarón, eh?" I said, "Yeah, you're Del Toro, eh?" Yeah. He says, "You did that thing that is," I says, yes. It's based upon Stephen King. And I was surprised that he knew the references. He says, yeah, how do you, I'm glad you found it. He says, yeah, no, and we started discussing Stephen King and how great that short story was. And then he takes a pause and says, the short story is great, so why you short suck so much? And I was, what? And he says, yes. And he started explaining me why. And he was absolutely right. And then we became best friends ever since.
So you were only 3 Musketeers. There are 4, but you were 3. Iñárritu, Del Toro, and you. Mm-hmm. Well, what was your relationship, your particular relationship to Mexican cinema, which has a great history, from Buñuel to Arturo Ripstein? So what was your relationship to your national cinema?
Look, I belong to a middle class in Mexico in a period in which the so-called golden period of cinema had passed. And then there was this period in the 60s, there was a young cinema that highly interesting stuff happened. And then it became a very stiff industry in which audiences in Mexico stopped watching Mexican cinema. Because I was a cinephile since young age, I could follow the whole thing. And I soon identified, it was so clear for me who was the generation who was the masters, the new masters. There was Ripstein and there was Casals, and that I remember one of the films that completely turned my life around was Felipe Casals' films called Canoa, that I think has been like a big mark in my life and the way that I approach things. And my dream was to be able to assist them. And I have to say, I put myself in their services so many times, and I never had the opportunity to do so. Nevertheless, among that generation, there were very generous people as well. And those people also helped me. And I have to say, if I have to say, I suck the teeth of that generation. I'm very grateful with that generation. Saying so, we were, when Chivo and I started, Lubezki's Chivo, we were struggling like hell to get rid of certain tendencies that we didn't like of that generation. Unfortunately, a lot of that got into, and I say unfortunately, into the technical aspect of it, and the visual and the polishedness of it. And I think that in a way that distracted my journey, and I dare to say Chivo's journey, maybe 10 years. In the sense that for too long we were concerned about creating a form, a good form, something that looks like we used to see French cinema or American cinema that can look, and Mexican cinema used to look a little funky. So, and I think ultimately, if I see in retrospect, was a distraction.
So we will start with the first excerpt, which is your first film in 1990, 27 years ago, which is, of course, a Mexican film. You start with a Mexican film. It's the story, in fact, of a Mexican yuppie who is like inspired, maybe you were inspired by Don Juan, the story of Don Juan, a man who seduces 100%. all the women, and particularly a nurse who is being dumped by him, and she she does something about the test for AIDS, and he thinks he has AIDS. And we'll see a small excerpt, and I think it's very interesting because you see so many, it's quite different from your later films. There are so many details and a lot of editing. In a few minutes, in 5 minutes, you have maybe 5 or 6 different situations. How do you say solo con tu pareja in English?
The way they call it there, that in the Criterion collection is called Love in the Time of Hysteria.
All right. Now there is, in 5 minutes, there is an amazing number of different situations and locale and so on, and even some surrealistic elements like this baby in celluloid or the piece of green paper that you see a short kind of influence of surrealism, I don't know, but the film is a sense of humor also, which is, so how did you, it's a film like really a first feature where you want to expand the language.
I guess that at that time my hero was Lubitsch. So I always wanted to do, Lubitsch and the school that Lubitsch created. I was very intrigued by that. I was very intrigued by rhythm. But at the same time, I was very intrigued about the new forms of cinema. You know, Nouvelle Vague has passed already, and Scorsese was doing, he had already done After Hours, in which, the convention was comedy has to be playing one shot. Comedy is to be playing one shot and the actors do the joke or you create the rhythm inside the frame, Howard Hawks and stuff. But then I was interested in how Scorsese approached comedy. And because Chivo and I were in search of this technical language and stuff, I guess that was the product. But also, at the time in Mexico, there was all this stupid stuff about AIDS in which, it was all this homophobic approach of AIDS. It's a disease that doesn't happen for male, That's only for women and for gays, not for male heterosexuals. And actually, it was more for gay. It was more specific for gay. And then what we wanted is to do a comedy that was going to challenge all this, all the macho attitude towards the whole thing, And that was the point of departure. But at the same time, at that point, look, Chivo and I, when we used to do the toilet shows, Lubezki, it's shorted Chivo. We always call it Chivo. With Chivo and I were doing the toilet, the Horas Marcadas, those horror shows in TV. We were happy if we have done one shot that was a decent shot. We evolved in this film saying, if we do one scene that is a good scene, we're happy. So we were really low expectations in terms of who we were, and it's, that's the truth of the matter.
I thought more of Blake Edwards, this kind of...
There was, because in a way, he's a hair of that whole thing, in a less formally and structurally less interesting. It's so funny how actually formally he was interesting early on, Days on Wines and Roses and all of that stuff. Later on, it's more about rhythm and gag.
And also, you have the breaking, with the scenes with all the people, the older people with their, with this little baby in celluloid, and so it's completely different atmosphere. And also the way you shoot the main character with a wide angle when he's, the Lubetsky is also with you trying to expand the visual aspect.
Look, at that time also, because we have just early years before Chivo and I, Lubezki and I, we produced a film, a very small Mexican film. It was the first film of a filmmaker called Luis Estrada. Well, we produced with him. And it was this thing in which it was the language of the long lens, because long lens everything look polished. Looks, you take the short depth of field allows you to look more vaporous, if you might. And I started reacting against that, and it's something that's been consistent ever since the wide angles. I was in my still camera. I was experimenting with wide angles, and wide lenses. And this film, I remember, I haven't seen this ever since, but we shot different optics. After my first 3 films we shot different optics, and ever since then I just shot 2 lenses.
And also we are reminded that you were a student in philosophy, because you start with a caption with the Newton law, and you have a kind of titles before the sequence.
And that's something that was already intrigued, because I was playing with stuff that I like in movies and stuff. I was intrigued with titles, the way that the Nouvelle Vague used to use titles, or even the way that Woody Allen uses titles, to separate chapters sometimes. So in other words, it was a salad of stuff that I was intrigued about. I'm very grateful of every movie I ever done, but as I grow older, I start having a bigger awareness of when I start having, I'm a late bloomer in that sense, a bigger awareness of the cinema, like the cinema I always love.
But the film gave you a passport for Hollywood. I mean, I know that Hollywood knows how to seduce foreign directors, the best of them, to become Hollywood directors. But how, after a first film, I think the American distributor hesitated to distribute it because you made fun of AIDS. You made a comedy with AIDS, which was supposed to be a very serious subject. Yeah. But nevertheless, you were invited to do The Little Princess in Hollywood. How did it come so quickly?
Well, it was one of those weird kinds. What happened is that this film premiered in the Toronto Film Festival in '91, I think, but even before arriving to Toronto, Miramax had bought the film, and the premiere was awesome, was amazing. And we were so happy because I was broke. I was in debt, and there was Chivo, my brother, and I, and my producer in Toronto, and that night I decided to take my brother and Chivo to celebrate, and we full celebrate. And then my producer next day says, "Hey, I have this receipt." Says, "Yes, I know, but we have to celebrate. We sold the movie." Says, "No," they say it fell apart. And so I says, "Yes, but I thought I was rich." At that point, I thought I was rich. And what happened is the film didn't get an American release. Nevertheless, some people liked the film, and they start showing it around to the producer's studio and stuff. Sidney Pollack saw it, He liked it. He called me. They flew me to LA. And in many ways, I have burned my ships in Mexico. I was not going to be able to finance another movie with the government at that point. I had burned my bridges there. So that was, again, it was not by design. It was where the job was. You know, I was anxious because I have debts, I have my kid, and I need to get some money, and suddenly they were offering me something over there. I went, and I was flattered and honored to meet Pollack. And somehow I discovered a teeth, you know, that could support my immediate thing, because it's so weird, Hollywood. You can live all your life without shooting one single movie and support yourself as a director. It's so weird. You can be developing projects, you know, and projects that will never happen. And I entered the limbo. You know, I entered the limbo, but first Sidney one more time, because one of his projects fell apart. And there were not projects that I was in love with. There were projects that I would say, okay, this is not offensive, I could do it, and you know, and I can survive. But he invited me to do a series called Fallen Angels, in which Soderbergh was one of the directors, Jonathan Kaplan, Phil Joannou, who was super hot at that time in Hollywood, and Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise directed an episode as well. And Sidney imposed me there, and I was the only unknown. So obviously everybody shot like for 10 days, I had 5 days. Everybody had, you know, I was the ugly duckling, but happened to be the episode that won all the awards later on, you know, of the anthology. It was a noir anthology. And from then, it happened that I read a little, I kept on developing in that limbo, and I was developing something at Warner's. Chivo had read the screenplay. I said, you should read the screenplay, it's great. I read the screenplay, I didn't even finish. I called my agents and say, hey, I want to do this film. And says, you can't do it because it's at Warner's. And it says, so you're already developing something, so it's very unlikely they will, you know. It says, well, then I quit to the other one. Says, yes, but if you quit to the other one, doesn't mean that they're going to give you this job. Says, Joe, I don't care, let's go. And it was the weirdest thing, because the producer didn't like me. Nobody wanted me. I went to the meeting and nobody wanted me. The producer, the writer, they were so against me. And I walk out with a job. It was as weird as that. I walk out with a job with a producer and a writer hated me, that then very early in the process, we became all best friends, you know? But it was this thing that all the force were against, and the producer kept on fighting with the studios. Why you gave the job to this guy? Through the mess that for the studio was a small movie, they couldn't care less.
But there is something really paradoxical, is that your two Mexican films, Y Tu Mamá También and the one we have just seen, are rather realistic movies. They don't belong at all to magic realism, which is linked to South America, to Latin America. You know, with Carlos Fuentes, with Garcia Marquez, with Vargas Llosa. They are more realistic, and it's in Hollywood that you make imaginary worlds and fantastic movies with great expectation. This film, The Little Princess, which I think for a long time was your favorite film, maybe since you made Gravity. Maybe today it's Gravity, but at a certain time you mentioned Little Princess as your favorite.
It is. I mean, once that I finish a film, I never see it again. Sometimes I have to do like some upgrade of, format, but it's no sound and out of order. And even like I cringe anyway, you know, watching the thing. Maybe the reason is all my friends, my peers, a lot of them, Alejandro, Guillermo, they talk, and they consider the films their babies, that they nurture their lives and they love them and stuff. For me, it's more like ex-wives. You know? I love them so much. Love them so much. I gave as much as I could. They gave me as much as they could. And we move on and we love each other from the distance, you know? But I don't want to see them again. You know, it's like, it's a little
But
bit
so,
like that.
the little princess, the sequence we are going to see, it's a little girl. Her father is sent to war in 1914, and she's sent to a school in New York. And the scene we have here is her arrival at this school, and she discovers the school mistress, the head of the school, and so on. It's very interesting because the next film we are going to see is your adaptation of Dickens, Great Expectations.
Do we have to go through that?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
No, but it's interesting because this is the adaptation we will see is in modern times. It's very far away from Dickens, and this is very Dickensian, this sequence.
Well, maybe one is a bit more successful than the other. What I mean is, look, in this film, it's something that like this was this search of form, and one of the things that we experimented in doing the TV show was color, and then I started doing TV shows that everything was green. The first film that you saw, maybe people didn't notice, but everything is green. All the sets, all the costumes, everything is green. And same in this film. You know, it was like, there was this formal, and I guess it's just because it was a unity of color. I was, frankly, probably insecure about the other possibilities, or ignorant, maybe. But there were, in this film, there were certain, this film really, when I read it, I didn't have to finish it to say, this is the film I have to do. Had to do with, yes, this spiritual quest. In many ways, I was very in sync with what I was going through in life. But also, something that I think has been present in all the films for one way or the other, probably except Gravity, because it's different to find lower classes in Gravity. In outer space, it's only rich people going up there, but it's the class conflict, you know, and this was a perfect example. It's a story of a rich girl who befriends the servant of the school, and the rich girl becomes the servant, you know. And I'm just saying that because that's something that carry on in the other films. Formally, nothing except the faith and convictions that stories can be told visually, you know, and dialogue is a support for what's the cinematic experience that includes sound and so on, and also try to give inside the frame as much thematic information in the frame, not explicit, thematic and visual information.
But what is characteristic of your future style, and even in this film, is the sequence shot. That is to have the camera for a long time in one shot. And you have this in the corridors of the school, and it will go on with all.
And we did one, if I remember correctly, we did one-shot deals, some one-shot deals insecurely. In all of my films, ever since my first one, I always had that kind of stuff. But we were aiming for those, but cautiously. Something that I have to say is the first film that, as opposed to the other film, that I learned something that is one of the amazing, fantastic gifts of creative process. That is limitations. You know, I didn't do it in my first film, and in this one we start putting limitations. One is that everything was going to be experienced from the point of view of the girl, meaning that everything is not only that in each scene the girl is there, everything is seen from her point of view, meaning her over the shoulder. You never see any other character over the shoulder, you know? You can see them from the perspective of the other characters, but not over the shoulders. Every master, when the camera, the wide shot, when the character enters, is always from the point. You never see stuff like before the character sees it, you know? And I discovered it was frustrating, limitation and frustrating, because cancel cool possibilities. But the consistency of the limitations one starts to create an inner language or an inner, like something consistent, formally consistent. So if something There were silly limitations, if you might, but it was the first one. There were conscious limitations.
In this film, you started a collaboration with Richard Beggs for the sound. You spoke about the sound conception of the film. And he will follow with you on Children of Men and Great Expectations.
Yeah, yes, of course.
So, what was his contribution? How did you work on the sound conception?
Well, one of the fun things that once that you are in the toy factory that Hollywood can be, is that my producer, who used to hate me and then he was cool with me, got, really a great group of people, including the production designer Bob Welch, who had done all the Tim Burton early work, and he had collaborated with Beggs. So he asked me if I would be interested in meeting with him, and I was thrilled. I love his work. Lately he hasn't done much. He's done mostly Sofia Coppola films. He's very focused in what he does. And it was an amazing collaboration. It was just, I think he's an artist in his own right.
And the character of the head of the school, who is Eleanor Brown, she looks a little like in the next film, Great Expectations, Anne Bancroft. This kind of old women, the way she walks down the stairs and...
I would say it's atypical, but doesn't look like my mom, but yeah, I don't know. yeah, probably. Look, if we are going to talk about the next one.
Yes, Great Expectations.
Let's go for it.
Which is really a very radical adaptation because it takes place in the modern time. You have again children, because this film starts with we don't see any excerpt of that part, but it starts with two children, the two characters of Dickens. And then it moves to the arts world because he's a painter, not in the novel, but in the film. He's a painter, and there is a portrayal of the scene of the artist and so on. So how did you decide to change completely the time of not the 19th century London, but New York and the art world?
That is part of the problem, I think. The part of the problem is not that it's adapted nowadays, because I think that can be done wonderfully. No, the problem is that I didn't do it. The problem is it's a project that was offered to me, and it was offered several times, and I always say no. And I allow myself to be seduced by the wrong reasons. One very important is I was running out of money, and I had to find a job, very soon. And then when I was in the point that, okay, I have to get a job, that unfortunately, that's what happened. I have said no to that. He says, yes, but they are really insistent that they want to meet with you. And Art Linson, the producer, is a super charming guy. And he says, Art wants to fly you to New York to have dinner with Bob De Niro. Why am I going to say I'm not going to have dinner with Bob De Niro? I went to New York to have dinner with Bob De Niro. I could have leave it there and says, nice to meet you. But then you just get seduced by it's seductive. And if you're stupid and you're a little, and I was insecure about, I was convinced by the studios, and that's something so dangerous, that you develop things. You're a director. You don't write. I forgot I was a writer. I forgot that I was anything else. I spent my days reading screenplays, and then selecting someone and going out to shoot. So this was the choice that was given to, the best choice that I got in that moment. And I have said no 3 times, and it's okay, let's go for it. And I became cocky. I said, well, the script, I don't like it, but we're going to compensate visually. Never. When it's not the essence, the concept, the soul is already there, you cannot compensate with anything. And that's the truth of the matter. It's not nobody's fault but mine. It's not the studio, it's not the producers, it's not the actors, it's mine. I did the wrong film. I should have not done, I didn't know what I was doing. It was a horrible experience because, yes, I was doing pretty shots. Some stuff is absolutely beautiful. I'm talking about Chivo's work, not my work. The design is absolutely beautiful. One more time, green. But that it is what it is like that. I was intrigued. Ultimately, I said, well, class is involved, because in Dickens, the tale is a tale of class ultimately.
But there is not the bitterness and the sadness of Dickens' original.
I didn't have the grip of the material. Also, there's another thing. Me as a Mexican, I didn't have this reverence towards Dickens. I was stupid. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to inflict you a commentary on what I think is...
Oh, by the way, I'm grateful. And I got amazing collaborators. Francesco Clemente did the paintings for the film. He loves the film, says, please stop trashing the film, stop trashing the film. I should not, but I have to be honest in terms of my process. We're in presence of, future filmmakers probably here and stuff. It's just, I blew it. Simple as that.
Well, I'm sorry, nevertheless, to inflict you a commentary because I will show you a very brilliant, I think, piece of cinema, which is in Great Expectations.
Okay.
It's with Ethan Hawke and Gwyneth Paltrow, and they are now adults. They were children. They loved each other as children. And maybe you can comment also on these 3 films in a row where you deal with children, The Little Princess, and this one, and Harry Potter. Child actors, how you deal with them. But we'll see this sequence where he's looking for her, and you can see it, and Lubetsky sequence shot.
Well, thank you. If the whole thing was like this. Thank you.
So I think then from now on you have to reconsider this film.
Yeah. I wish that was a film. No, look, I should be less tough on it. It's just that truth of the matter maybe has nothing to do with the film. I don't see the films after. It's more about the experience and the learnership. And I feel embarrassed about part of my process. I feel embarrassed I didn't have the grasp of the material. But I'm so grateful with this film, because if it's not because of this film, I would have not done my next film. And literally I was, because everything is so perfectly designed, colors and stuff. And one day we're going to one location, and we're going through New Jersey, in New York. And I'm just looking rooftops and stuff, and I say, Chivo, why the heck are we stylizing things? What's happening? And he says, well, it's too late in this film, man.
But this incredible camera movement in this sequence, I mean, it's just, how many sequence shots there are? 2 or? In what we just saw.
Oh, how many shots together? Maybe it's a couple of shots together.
Sure, yes.
Just because of you remember, it was 35. It was a different game now to be able to, because I wanted to extend the run more, and physically we didn't have more street. But all of this thing of the continuous shot, maybe since my film school shorts, I did one that the whole thing was a shot composed mostly with cuts, but everything leading to the climax and resolution that is a one-shot deal, that the whole point is a one-shot deal, of that. So from very early, I learned to love, from obviously seeing Orson Welles and that kind of stuff, but I was exposed very early to Yang Tso, that I was very impressed by. It's a completely different thing, because it's very abstract. Mm-hmm. But I start loving the possibilities, and also watching. Actually, the important thing of this film is what happened after. That I really lost my track, and I I was enthused, okay, what's going to be my next project? And Hollywood, I'm going to read, and didn't do well commercially, so they don't send you that good of scripts. And I was in that kind of a limbo when I was completely disenchanted by the whole thing. And then I realized I was disenchanted not by cinema, but what I've been doing and the process and where I was. So I went to the video shop. There were still videos at the time. And I just went there and impulsively just started renting the films that I considered that made me fall in love with film in the first place. And I took there were VHSs, like piles. Actually, they were very obsessed. You cannot take that many. I said, please, 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 I have to leave credit cards, whatever. I took them and I locked myself 1 week. And I was just in a diet and I realized I haven't watched these films. I have abandoned cinema. I have abandoned the stuff that I love. You know, and that's the moment that I decided to do it to Mamá También.
But talk a little about the music in that film, and also your view of music in films in general. How do you use it?
Well, it's very different. I think that I consider this film school, what we're watching right now. You know, it's I was very lucky. I was blessed that we worked with Patrick Doyle, the composer. He's fantastic. I had so much fun, and he's so much fun. The first film, all the music was Mozart, Don Giovanni, because in many ways was based. The structure was, as you said, Don Giovanni was the Don Giovanni of Tirso de Molina. That is the one that Mozart took as a basis for his Don Giovanni. And the music was the Don Giovanni mostly, and other Mozart music. The second one was, and the third were Patrick, in which the music was going to be a character, to be present, to be omnipresent all the time. And I enjoy the work of it. I watch it now, and
Look, the response.
I know it's a fantastic response. Yes, it's beautiful, the music. Of course, you can play it and you will applaud. You know, my thing with that is the combination of everything for me now, what Italians will call troppo. You know, too much.
And so the next film is interesting, what you have just said about your Hollywood period, because you go back to Mexico and very different from...
By the way, I never live in Los Angeles.
No, but I mean, you come back from your artistic experience.
Sorry, Guillermo, I have to point it out.
but the film is really a kind of love letter to the Mexican landscape. It's a road movie, and you have these two, Diego Luna and Gabriel Garcia Marquez, not Marquez, Bernard, and Maribel Verdú, who are, she's older than these two guys. They just met her. Her husband is cheating on her, and they go towards a seaside, to a beach, but they travel around Mexico, and it's like rediscovering your own, even if you lived in Mexico City, still, it's like you rediscovered the landscape after two films in Hollywood.
Yeah, no, it was, definitely was, I had just to find myself again one more time. And I was lost, as I said before, I was lost between, first and foremost, the blue-collar aspect of it, of just the means to support. And also that Hollywood had convinced me that I was a hack, not a director for hire. I was not a writer. I was not something generating his own projects. And I believed it, but that's my fault. So that what happened after this is I had to find myself who I was. That's the reason of watching all those films. I was living, by the way, Mexico. Ever since I did my first film, I never went back to live in Mexico. I lived most of the time in New York at that time, and I wanted to go back to my country and make a film there. Also, when I start watching all these films, I start getting very, very, very upset with myself. because but that's what I was supposed to be doing, not all of these other stupid things, And they're not stupid; they're part of my process, and I'm grateful. And here's present someone that I think that in my life, career has been a big support in that period, particularly because he was going through similar struggles in Hollywood as Guillermo. And also losing his way and trying to find his way in all of this. And again, I'm not saying that everybody does that journey, falls into that. It's just that I think that you have to arrive with more security than the one that Guillermo and I arrived as who we were as filmmakers, And so I immediately called my brother and said, "Hey, you remember that story ages ago that we talked about? Let's do it." He says, "Okay." And then he flew to New York and we wrote the screenplay like in 3 weeks.
So now we are going to see this on this long journey to the beach. They stopped in a little town, and we have a scene with these two young guys, the Jules et Jim. I don't know how you have Mexican names for Jules et Jim, and this woman, and they get together. Maybe first time they talk in a restaurant. So we see the sequence. You tell us about the place and how you discovered this place and the journey that it was. Now, how was the location scouting, and how did you discover this place? And you have also this conversation between the three of them, but the beggar woman, the other woman who goes into the kitchen, and so on. These kind of details. Was it improvised partly, or was it all written exactly?
It was a combination of all of the above. The way we found the places is that Carlos and I wrote even before we finished the screenplay, that we had the structure, that it was going to, in the search of this mythical beach that they never been. So we decided to take the route, and pretty much the route started informing one more time the screenplay, and the social context started to inform the film and the characters. This one is a place it's a town that is 45 minutes from the capital of Oaxaca. It's a town that is constantly under siege because they have a big resistance against all these very corrupt movements of the government in Oaxaca, and like also authoritarian stuff happening in Oaxaca. And part of the idea, early on, Carlos and I were very, very clear that this was as much as a coming of age of Julio and Tenoch, the two characters, as also the coming of age of a country. And we started with Chivo to work. Again, this film, we started filling it with limitations. Limitations now saying no dollies, no cranes, no nothing, handheld, wide angles, no other lenses, honoring the moment, but also in which to create the film language and experience in which character is as important as context, and each one informs the other. So I think in that sense, it's two parallel stories that are being told with the same thematic.
The film is also about, for these two guys, is finding their identity, which was the same problem with you. You find your identity.
It was absolutely the same issue going on, but also refining my country, refine my sense in my own country, in a period in which my country was going into the biggest transformations in the recent history. That is the transformation for the first elections, the first to become a democracy that we have now.
The choice of this little the characters that come into play with the three main characters, this beggar woman and this, it was all written.
Some were written, some were, you're in the place and you find the people and you see the context and then you involve the situation. And in many instances were written but based upon what we have already seen in the first time that we went just to scout. So it was a combination of both. Trying always not just to be for the sake of being folkloric, just for the sake. It was always for some thematic purpose of the scene. That was we were clear at that time about that every scene had to deal with death. So in this one, even if by the way she's talking about the death of her aunt and how it affects her, and so we wanted to involve all people, and so that was the process of how everything, had to work in a way. One thing is the reflection of the other, or the projection of the other.
At the same time, it's unbelievable that this film could be shot in America. I mean, the sex scenes and so on, this triangular love story and so on. I mean, there is
the explicitness of the sex.
It was impossible.
Well, even
to do it in America,
just to find the actors to do it with. I tell you, because in Great Expectations, the actors explicitly said we would do that in an independent movie, but not in a Hollywood movie. And I was like, how do you define Hollywood, independent or no independent? So there's a lot of culture around what you do and you don't do, Well, here we had absolute freedom. And one more time, at this point, Alejandro had already walked into my and Guillermo's life. Right before we released, 1 year before, because first it started Guillermo, that he was trying to find himself, and he did Devil's Backbone, and then I was with Tu Mamá También. I was writing with Carlos, but conferring with Guillermo. So much that the resolution, the end, I was like, okay, I have all of this, but I don't find the point of connect. How is this going to be relevant thematic? He just says, man, these two have to kiss each other. They have to have sex with each other. That's what's going to happen. And then it's going to be all the shame, stupid shame, because of all the baggage, cultural baggage that they have. But it was Guillermo, I remember that afternoon, that you said, and it was like, oh. So, so yeah, it was, but yeah, and Alejandro is that I was reading the script, I was already prepping, and Alejandro, that I have met a couple of years ago, that he showed me a short film. He went to LA to show. He said, I'm a fan, can I go? And I said, sure. And I have heard of him from other people, from Chivo. So he came. Chivo says, I worked with a guy the first day of shoot. He went to work with a guy, says never shot anything, that Alejandro González Iñárritu would try to look in the camera through the place where you hold the tripod. He will try to put his eye there and stuff. Chivo describes that he was just like trying to, and Chivo says, by the second day, he knew more than anybody in the set, more than me, more than anything, So he was telling me so much about Alejandro. He contacted me, he showed me the short. I saw the short, he says, Alejandro, this is horrible. And we talked about it. And then he went back and he started writing and stuff. And then he came up with the screenplay of Amores Perros, and I was like, wow! And he read it, and blah, blah, blah. And at that period, he had completed his first cut. So I watched the cut. I'm in awe. It was really shocked. And from that short, I was not expecting that. This is as if you're watching my first Great Expectations, Tu Mamá También, and then you see Children of Men. It's like, and And I call Guillermo and says, hey, Guillermo, do you mind if you see this thing? And this bastard, instead of saying, Alejandro, come up, he arrives to Alejandro's house not knowing Alejandro. They didn't know each other. With his bag, because he was going to stay there 2 days or 3 days. I don't know how many days you stayed. And he sat there. And now there's a big conflict. According to Guillermo, how many minutes you got?
No conflict. I have a VHS. It's 21 minutes longer before we fucked it up.
Okay. According to Guillermo, he cut 21 movies out of Amores Perros. According to Alejandro, it's 3 or 4?
No, Alejandro said 7 and then 3.
Yeah. But anyway, so that was the beginning of a collaboration. So he released Amores Perros. And he became part of also a bouncing board for this film.
Now, we go to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Almost everybody thinks it's the best Harry Potter. It's more somber, it's more there is more anguish and so on, and you deal again with children. So I chose another excerpt which gives perhaps this kind of gothic dimension to the story. But how did you come to direct it? Is it true that J.K. Rowling liked The Little Princess and she asked you to do? She approved your
correct.
name.
Yeah, I mean, I have to preempt that as saying that, again, it was not by my design. When I was finishing Y Tu Mamá También, we have just started going to Venice, I think. I started writing a new screenplay that was supposed to be my next film.
About the Mexican
No.
rebellion, the students.
No,
in
well,
Mexico?
that was, but seriously, I was writing one screen that I wrote the whole screenplay. It was ready in 2000. I delivered the screen because it was for a studio, and it was ready in the January of 2001, and they refused to do it. And I might find myself one more time, like saying, wow, what am I going to do? With the resources I have, I cannot survive to put together another Mexican movie. I need to, and I was trying actually to put together something or to do whatever when that offer came, that it was so funny that they came to me for Harry Potter. And Guillermo, Gael and Diego, they just were making fun of me all the time about me going to do Harry Potter. And I have to say, I joined the joke. I didn't know anything about Harry Potter. I have gone to see the premiere, not the premiere, but the first one, and I was not impressed, and and they offered and says, okay, yes, send it, but I had it there. And then I'm talking with Guillermo, and I said, what's happening? No, this other project that fell apart, the name of that screenplay was Children of Men. Okay? So I'm talking with Guillermo, said, no, they don't want to do children, they will never want to do this, it's too obscure for them, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Says, I don't know what to do now, and he says, have they offered you something? No, just crap, they offered me Harry Potter. And then Guillermo says, what are you talking about? He says, yeah, they offered me Harry Potter, and man, how am I going to do Harry Potter? It's Harry Potter. He says, have you read the books? And I said, I saw the film, it's not my thing. And then he said, have you read the books? No, I have not read the books. And then he got so pissed off at me. Sorry for the words. He said, you fucking arrogant bastard. Go right now, buy the fucking books and call me back.
All right.
And then
now you are in Guillermo del Toro's territory. So this surrealistic dimension or fantastic dimension, and something that you obviously you are very much aware of in this film. It has an extra dimension compared to the first two films.
Well, I approach it in reality, I approach it in a realistic way. You know, not naturalistic, but realistic. Look, it was same as Little Princess. I don't know why they offered me this movie, because I was coming out of a of an explicit sex film. Yeah, and people complained that why are you going to give to you? And I understand why. I know then later I learned that J.K. liked a lot Little Princess. And when I talked with J.K., what I was fascinated, and that's something I discussed with Guillermo about the Harry Potter universe, is that there's a contemporary reference and as a social reference to most of this stuff. So I decided to approach it like that, you know, and just I was approaching everything in a more kind of realistic way. I mean, if there's a character that's going to become the werewolf, is actually yes, but this is the guy who ultimately has a tendency, has an addiction, you know. And we approach, and with the actors, I approach with him as you're an addict. You know, you're a very good, nice person, except when you fall into your habits or you're a danger to the children. You know, and that was the approach, and before the monster was the character, that I think is something I learned from this man, you know, and that was the approach basically, and something fun was working with the children. I enjoy working with children. I did in doing TV. I did
Great Expectations. You had them
in A Little Princess and Great Expectations, the whole first part. Doing on the TV shows that I did one or two with children, and I feel very comfortable working with them. I find it so easy to work with them, you know, because they offer miracles immediately, you know, and the approach here was the film was mostly cast. I completed the cast of, you know, extra characters and stuff, but I was blessed to work with these kids. I was very lucky because the story takes place when they're 13. It's a turning point, you know, becoming teenagers. And they were 13, becoming teenagers. They started taking seriously themselves about acting, as opposed to just being children playing and being called to do the shot. And that was interesting. Like Daniel Radcliffe was so working with Gary Oldman. Daniel Radcliffe, he was 13 and he was so earnest and so intense like Gary, you know. So it was fantastic. It was so great.
Is it true that you asked David Radcliffe to look at Les 400 Coups by Truffaut?
Yes, of course. It's the first thing that I asked him to do.
you do that sometimes with your actors? Show them
yes.
a film? Or?
Yes. A film, a book, some music or something that...
So that they get the tune that you want.
Yeah, so they get it. It's a shortcut. You show the 400 blows and you get it. And if you're 13, you see these princess, I get it. You know, but also I wanted to see the naturalism of it. You know, of the performances of the actor, what's Jean-Pierre Léaud, Jean-Pierre Léaud, just transparency, you know, and they were very excited about that. You know, the way that I worked with them was they were very earnest about doing their you know, I asked them to do the first thing. There was a homework doing I wanted their autobiography written by them, but from the standpoint of their character. You know, so and they were really good at doing all that stuff. It was so much fun.
Now we go to the next film. I know that you admire Stanley Kubrick. It's very interesting because you did first the dystopia and then the Space Odyssey. So he did first the Space Odyssey and after the dystopia. He did 2001 and after Clockwork Orange. And you did Children of Men and then Gravity.
I wish I've done the other ones.
Yes. But no, but it's interesting because you have two examples of the same type of genre. One, the dystopia about the society of England, which is even more of present today than when you did Children of Men, because it's really about the refusal of migrants. The state is chasing migrants, doesn't want to accept them, and so on. You have that every day on the newspaper today, much more than 10 years ago. And at the same time, after that, we will talk, of course, about gravity. So we'll see, that's another, I think your work is extremely eclectic. You do very different things. This is really an action scene, which I've chosen from The Children of Men, where it's a society where the last person born was 18 years ago. Nobody is born anymore, except a black woman who is having a child. She's bearing a child. And of course, the people who have a child are being chased and killed and so on. So we see she's under the protection of a man, Clive Owen, and he finds himself in this incredible, like the Middle East situation today, like Beirut or like Damas or whatever. So we go back again to your sequence shot. That was incredible and very much, as I said earlier, very much about today.
Well,
more than even at the time.
I have to go because when I start writing this in October 2011, and the reason is that Y Tu Mamá También got a premiere in Venice. We flew from Venice to Toronto Film Festival, where we had our premiere that was amazing, and the next day was September 11, and we were stranded in Toronto. And I was with Gael and Diego, and it was a very strange time, very reflective, and I became very intrigued about how this new century was going to shape. And it's when this material came to me. I didn't read the novel. I read a coverage, and I said, okay, I want to do this. I have the story. If based upon that premise, I have that story. I was never interested in doing a science fiction movie. Actually, my approach, and for me, is not a science fiction movie.
So it's dystopia.
Probably, yes, it's a dystopia, definitely. But everything that in many ways, I'm very lucky that the movie didn't happen after Y Tu Mamá También, because during the time I was doing Harry Potter, that shooting Harry Potters is so long, and you're working with children and stuff, that part of it's not like an intense schedule when you're doing like a smaller movie. You know, you have more time in between things. So it gave me time to start doing a very in-depth research in what I was calling is the themes that are shaping this century. And I was reading and getting in touch with amazing, intelligent people and coming to the same conclusions, all of them. So the film starts to be that, and I was more interested in many ways. The thriller, yes, I always like genre and I like the thriller aspect of it, but I was interested through that to be just like the sheep's skin, the skin of a sheep, to be telling the story, this almost essay that was going to be in the background. And it became a film as something was very intensely researched, and in which the reference were reference of something else, you know, everything thematic, from music, from the artwork that you see, everything thematically had to come together.
But there is this documentary-like style that is very, of course, yes, characteristic of that sequence, for instance.
Well, one thing that early on was Battle of Algiers, that I remember. Pontecorvo. I wanted Clive. Actually, that's the reason Clive, because the script was kind of obscure in many ways, character-wise and stuff. I was more intrigued in the background, in the context, in the society around, and Clive says, "Well, I want to work with you, the script." And then I said, "Can you please watch Battle of Algiers?" And he says, "I completely get it. You know, I completely get it." And with Chivo talking, because when another amazing thing of going back to write is that by writing you are just you're writing not words, you're describing your shots. So most of the shots that are already suggested on the page. And I was talking to Chivo about that stuff. I says, yes, it's like the difference that I wanted to be real time. You know, approach it as just the same way that we approach it to Mamá También, about finding a moment of truthfulness and being there just to register that moment of truthfulness, in which foreground and background are the same thing. And therefore, the long shots. We tried at some point Steadicam, and we realized it was too polished for this. So we decided to go handheld, but it was very clear it was going to be mostly long, continuous shots. Not because of an Olympic of continuous shots, you know. It was just, and because when the shots lost its meaning, we would cut, you know, as opposed to force the shot, in other words. So, and that was the approach. But what it was important, again, is what was in front of the camera.
But the contribution of George Richmond, who held the camera, was very
amazing.
Important.
No, yes. Amazing, because, I mean, Chivo frankly said, I cannot operate this thing. You know, it's running backwards through debris. And for a long time, I mean, you have to have a very strong back because those shots are very long. Even poor Clive Owen, he was barefoot running through all this debris, poor thing. He should have not seen Battle of Algiers, maybe.
Where did you find the locations?
This was, everything was shot around London, but the whole idea was to do reference of, everything is visually based of reference of photographs, news, reference from the last 10 years of conflict in the world. So we wanted London to become a microcosm of the world, as opposed to the first world kind of living in a different geography than the zones of conflict. Now everything is inside there, and that was part of the thing. And so everything is around London.
So time is running, but we see the last excerpt, Gravity, which in a way is pure cinema in the sense that there is almost no plot, really. It's almost a linear story with no episodes and so on. It's just this woman lost in space with a contact with Kowalski. Is it Kowalski from Streetcar Named Desire?
No.
It's not
it's
Stanley
from
Kowalski?
Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. He knows.
Is where?
The TV series, there was a character they were always killing.
Oh, yes, because there is also Marlon Brando.
No, of course, but that's too highbrow.
All right, so we see, to end this conversation, we see an excerpt from Gravity with Sandra Bullock. Now, I chose this sequence because of the opposition between the first part and the second part. That is the chromatic experience. For the blues totally dominate the first part, the yellows, the fire in the second part. So, can you talk about this, chromatic visualization of the film?
With Chivo we work very, it was very clear early on that it was going to be a digital project. And we started working like crazy to find the actual references. So in the exteriors, actually, we discovered that it is a light that doesn't exist in planet Earth. So it was Chivo's task to try to replicate that stuff. And in here, we have endless references of the space station. So we knew that we wanted this moment of quietness. We have come out of a more warm moment that she's in a fetal position, and it's a bit warmer moment. We wanted, it's a relaxed moment, but we had to go back into the jeopardy. So it was the color was it was not so comforting. It was enough to not. It was is this cool thing through the station that also is very organic to the real lighting in the station. By the way, the station is a replica of the real one. and she will have the lights reference and all of that stuff. And the second part, obviously, is the fire that is coming in the moment in which this woman is still adrift in a way that she has not. She just adrift and not even trying to row, you know. And in other words, she's not being proactive about trying to save her ass. She's been just escaping. And it's going to be a transition in which she's going to be forced to do so. This is a film that, not unlike others that I've done, this is not a movie that I had in my head for many years. After Children of Men, I had this small project that I was going to do because I felt that I have the security.
Daniel Auteuil and Charlotte Gainsbourg?
That one. And because I thought, okay, now is my moment to go back to do my, I already did Harry Potter, whatever, Children that I wanted to do as my film, but I had certain response, so I feel also thematically ready to do my own stuff. And I have the money to survive while I go through the experience, and then life happens, and life doesn't, so I find myself that life does their things, and my life turned upside down, and I find myself with an amazing need to raise money to survive, but I had the wisdom and also the security to say it's going to be on my terms. So pretty much the whole thing of Gravity with my son was when he had written the other script as well. We put together the story maybe in 9 hours. And because it was this thing of, I'm going to do the film that I hope that they will buy, but that I really want to do. And it was Jonas who said, look, he loves, for instance, Dead Man Escapes. And I said, why don't we try to, it's impossible, we don't try to do Dead Man Escape, but...
Un condamné à mort s'est échappé. It's a French title.
Okay.
For the audience.
Sorry. Yeah, Bresson's film. And I said, yes, and that was, curiously, that was the point of the departure of a conversation, of how you create, because I find that Bresson has created one of the most suspenseful scenes in cinema with that escape, and obviously is a film that is about freedom, but in a freedom as a higher concept, and that was the point of departure for conversations. So first draft, it was only one character, didn't have a name, it was the woman, and there was not one single line of dialogue. And that was a tough sell.
But I started this conversation by mentioning that you did some philosophy studies, and it's interesting because this film is philosophical. It's about rebirth. It's about a new life. This woman has lost a child, and she rediscovers herself. And all the great science fiction films or books are all philosophical. It's a genre that is fundamentally philosophical.
Well, this is not science fiction in the sense that is nothing. Everything that we show exists. We just heighten in many ways, it's not, strictly speaking, not science fiction because everything out there is factual. We just heighten, it's more like a thriller or something, but I understand that because you have space, there's a reference of science fiction. But yeah, I'm glad you got those things, because part of the thing, and I guess that has been like the search, is to how to convey themes without being explicit, without being without doing expositions about them. So how to talk about this thing of rebirth without talking about it? How to talk about, how to express it, how to feel it, how to experience it, and yeah, that was, and that is what it's been like. I'm trying to do in particularly ever since I have a more mature conscience about cinema.
Thank you very much, Alfonso
I
Cuarón.
really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Michelle. Gracias.